Please join us in welcoming to the stage Dr. George Poste.
Governor Ducey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for this award. And Joan, my thanks to you and AZBio for the extraordinary organization you put together this week. Also to my fellow awardees, I congratulate you, and particularly my good friend and colleague, Stephen Johnson, who you saw on the video, and in particular, all my colleagues who were generous enough. Sometimes when you look at that, it's the sort of thing that if my late parents were here, my father would be proud and my mother would have believed it. But I think it's always gratifying to receive a reward that reflects past accomplishments. But the real privilege that we have as researchers is we live in the future. And that is the old adage, the best way to influence the future is to invent it. And that is undoubtedly true. But it's somewhat sobering to reflect on 5 decades of research, which started for me in the 1960s. My hair was much longer. My children and grandchildren don't actually believe my green card photograph when it was down here. And my first exposure to the United States was the University of California at Berkeley in 1966. So you can see how it was shaped. But coincidentally, that 5 decades actually matches the duration of the contemporary biotechnology industry. And it's remarkable what has actually happened in 5 decades, a dynamic, emergent global industry. 670 public companies now, over 200,000 employees, over 200 billion in sales, 40 billion a year invested in research and development, 150 billion on top of what the pharmaceutical industry spends, and 20 billion in ag biotech. And as you heard from the governor, we are in momentum in Arizona, and the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce equates the bioscience contribution to this economy at roughly 36 billion. But as the governor also emphasized, the statistics are important, but it is really the motivation of what we do. It's the real value that derives from the products and services that this industry creates. Profound advances, not just in healthcare, but in agriculture, environmental sustainability, biomass production, and energy. It is truly a ubiquitous technology. As was mentioned on the video, I've had the personal privilege of being in academia, industry, and government, and also with continued engagement with a number of small biotech companies. In the pharmaceutical industry, and many friends here tonight have been in the pharmaceutical industry, you know that the ultimate thing to achieve is a new drug application, an NDA. What it really stands for is now do it again. That is what you have to do, because there is indeed much to be done. Biotechnology is and must be in the vanguard of dealing with grand challenge problems, not just here in the United States, but globally. Let me just highlight 4 areas in biomedicine alone that will challenge our collective creativity. In cancer, much progress has been made, but 600,000 deaths a year is unacceptable. In infectious disease, we face a looming crisis in terms of antibiotic resistance, an entirely predictable problem, identifiable in the early 1980s, but complacency and delusion and lack of political will meant that we did not engage in dealing with that. As the late Josh Lederberg, the Nobel Prize winner, said, in dealing with pathogenic organisms, it's a battle between their genes and our wits, and we have to re-engage. Staying with infectious disease, we need to be much better prepared for the next viral threat. SARS, MERS, dengue, chikungunya, Ebola, and now Zika, and the omnipresent threat of pandemic flu. We have the tools to be better at prevention and prediction. What is now needed is the political will globally, and also the market incentives to ensure that that creativity is harnessed. The last is an aging society, which, as my own gray hair reflects, the boomers are turning 65. 470,000 new boomers expected in Arizona by 2025. And the medical Titanic will in fact collide with the twin icebergs of cancer and Alzheimer's disease. Every single malignancy will increase by 20% by 2020 on the basis of demographics alone. How will we deal with that challenge? Beyond the ravages of these diseases, how do we ensure quality of life, which the governor mentions, not just for the elderly, but for our citizens at large? And last, in the scientific pantheon, is the fact that as technology accelerates ever faster, we have to think about the public policy and legal implications. And as some of you may be aware, the latest advances in gene editing technology have just been identified by the Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, as representing one of the top existential threats on the national security landscape for the United States. Last and certainly not least, but it mirrors exactly what the governor said. How do we forge the optimum environment for innovation, entrepreneurialism, and large-scale biotechnology investment in Arizona? Comfort and complacency are the enemies of innovation and risk-taking. They predispose to sustaining the status quo. Comfort and complacency undermine countries, corporations, sports teams, institutions, and individuals. History tells us that the most fertile periods of innovation always occur at times of disruption, tragically in wars or other existential threats. But for us, the emergence of entirely new technologies that permit us to grapple with complex problems. The first 50 years of the biotechnology industry qualify as a profound disruptor, reshaping medicine, and agriculture, and much beyond. But that first wave is coming to an end. Those regions that invested 3 decades ago, the Bay Area, San Diego, Seattle, Boston, Cambridge, who had the foresight to make that investment, have derived the prosperity that comes with it. And as the governor said, we are now well poised to mirror that because of the fact that we're on the cusp of a totally new change in biotechnology. I can't even define what biotechnology is any longer because it's the biosciences merging with materials science, optics, electronics, robotics, automation engineering, advanced software design, machine learning, and analytics for big data. And we are well positioned in this state to exploit that. And I make no apologies for highlighting the truly transformational changes of the institute at which I work, ASU. It has undergone a radical change. It is the most disruptive, innovation-driven enterprise in the entire country at this time. But it isn't just Michael Crow's vision of excellence. It's excellence linked to how you apply that to real-world problems and a purposeful orchestration to bring about that technology convergence I spoke about. And two other statistics to add what the governor said. We're not only the fastest growing university in terms of competitive research revenues, we now rate in the top 20 research institutions without a medical school. But intellectual capital alone, even though it's an obligate requirement, success is not enough. As the governor indicated, it's a recognition and commitment by leaders across the entire community, the legislature and business leaders in particular, to understand and build the climate and the infrastructure as the jobs for high-tech job creation, and to better immunize the community against cyclical fluctuations of the kind that render construction, real estate, and tourism so vulnerable. Neither education nor technology exist in a vacuum. In deciding where to invest and locate, the leaders of innovators in high technology look, as the governor said, to a much broader landscape of the political, the financial, the civic, the cultural, and quality of life landscapes. And without planning a coherent strategy that looks about all of those, success will only be occasional and episodic rather than deeply embedded and sustainable. As the governor said, the launch of a Achieve 60 AZ is exactly an example of bringing all of those community, business, philanthropy, and education together. And indeed, against that spirit, I think it very much epitomizes what this state is about. So Joan, again, thanks to you and your colleagues at AZBio for this award and the great work that you do. Governor, thank you for your commitment to this industry by your presence here tonight, but much more important by all of the actions that you described. And we all stand ready to help you in advancing the competitiveness of the great state of Arizona that we're proud to call home. Thank you.